And with that, we'll move on to 4.4, our ESSA presentation with our district office directors.
So we'll bring up the rest of the...
Dr. Kupel, do we have anyone in the hallway who needs a seat?
I think they actually went with those kids.
All right. So I'm joined up here by Mr. Armstrong, Mr. Kraisman, Mrs. Ziegler, Mrs. Camerata, Mrs. Marchioli. I will say that if you like that last presentation, you're going to love this one. Because figured that's why people were here today for ESSA. So we're excited to have you here. Every Student Succeeds Act, ESSA, and a little bit of student data we'll talk about today. That was a little spoiler alert because the purpose... It's upside down. There we go. The purpose of today is really to go over every Student Succeeds Act, specifically the 7 new measures of accountability. See, got you, Mr. Jackson, already, don't I? It's a hook right there. That was the hook. And then, and then take some of our student data and put it over those 7 measures of accountability. But before we get there, just a little bit of a look back to kind of see where we are in terms of really the federal government and different acts that we're going to talk about. ESSA, No Child Left Behind, and then ESSA. Elementary and Secondary Education Act, really that's a civil rights act that came about from the War on Poverty, Lyndon Johnson's campaign, the War on Poverty. It's really the goal, the intent is to help our students from low-income families and low-income schools and low-income school districts really even the playing field, so to speak. Make sure that there's educational access and equity across all school districts. How? It's the basis, ESSA was the basis for the distribution of federal funds. When I say federal funds, some of the ones that are better known are certainly our special education funds and our Title grants, Title I grants, Title II grants, Title III, things of that nature. Since 1965, it has been reauthorized 8 times, in case you're playing trivia at any point at home. And then that brings us to some of the 2 of the better well-known reauthorizations. First one being No Child Left Behind. That really came to pass because as a nation, there was a thought and a feeling that we were falling behind internationally with different countries, obviously, around the world. The focus really became on accountability, testing, graduation rates, to improve education for all by mandating annual testing. And that was around 2002. And when I talk about annual testing, you're looking at grades 3 through 8, math and ELA, and then math and ELA at least once in high school for our students. Additionally, you're looking at science in 1 time in elementary, 1 time in middle school, and 1 time in high school. Some of the things that you would hear under No Child Left Behind, you hear acronyms like AYP, Adequate Yearly Progress, making sure that we're making that. We'll talk about the new acronym for accountability going forward. But a lot of how that was driven was through looking at the subgroups and looking at really closing the achievement gaps, okay, between, let's say a subgroup would be economically disadvantaged and their peers who are not economically disadvantaged, making sure that those gaps are closed. That was a lot of the focus of No Child Left Behind. Around 2010, 2012, not to get too far into the weeds, but by 2014, all schools and school districts had to have 100% proficiency across all the different subgroups with all the different tests. Well, around 2010, 12, that's when the federal administration said, this is going to be very tough to attain. Quite honestly, it's unrealistic. And that was some of the intent. You put the goal beyond where you might think people can achieve, and you make some progress. And there was great progress and has been. Right now, nationwide, and Lancaster mirrors the nation, the graduation rates have never been higher, and the amount of students going on to college has never been higher. Which takes us to ESSA with the current shift from a look at graduation under No Child Left Behind to really focusing on preparation and preparation for our students as they enter college and careers. Couldn't have been better to have the CDOS presentation before us. They were fantastic. Mrs. Prechtel is doing a great job with support from so many in this room, but really that focus now is getting our students prepared for life after high school. We're excited about that, and we'll talk a little bit about why, because we think that with our teachers and the community and our administrators, we're well positioned, but that's a little coming attraction. One of the things we're excited about, it's going beyond the testing. There are 7 measures we talked about, and it's a comprehensive look at our students and their success. There will be continued use of statewide tests for accountability, but it's also intended to provide more flexibility and more control at the local and state levels. So you've heard me say multiple measures of accountability. It's also heard as multiple measures of success. They are, and you'll see they're kind of grouped into 2 different groups, one of 4, one of 3. I won't read those to you, but I will say that as this presentation unfolds, there's a theme that hopefully you'll notice and you'll see if you can distinguish between the group of 4 and the group of 3. Little teaser for those of you following along. Subgroups, okay? There are subgroups still under ESSA that we are accountable for presenting to the state. Here they are on the left side, all students. Race and ethnicity, we have 6 subgroups that we have to report to the state on. English language learners, students with disabilities, and economically disadvantaged. On the far right here, right there, we have new reportable subgroups in New York State that are just reportable for the state. Remember, ESSA is federal legislation where the statewide is looking at gender, migrant students, homeless youth, military-connected youth, and students in foster care. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Mrs. Ziegler to look into the student data, specifically the CCCR one.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Now, I'm going to start this portion of the presentation with college, career, and civic readiness. And the unique part about this part of the presentation is that we're actually starting at the finish line. When you look at college, career, and civic readiness, we're really looking at the student's 13-year run through education. And as Andy mentioned, are they ready for life beyond high school? Have we prepared them adequately for the future? And really, by looking at this indicator as a measure of school quality and student success, it rewards schools for offering challenging courses to our students. And when you hear that, you really understand why we're so excited about this. We've put ourselves in a situation with the courses, the teachers that are offering these incredible courses for our students to really make sure that they are prepared for life beyond high school. And we talked in the spring, one of the questions that we always ask is this something that's going to be good for kids? And you can see with the, as I go through the number of opportunities that are here for kids, that this really is a driving force and one of the reasons why we're doing what we're doing here in Lancaster. So let's take a look at what the readiness measures are that are being looked at as a measure for us for school quality. So we've got Regents diplomas. Now, we want to encourage all of our students to receive Regents diplomas, but as you heard from Ms. Prechtel and her students, CDOS is one of those opportunities for our students. Another opportunity is a Regents diploma with advanced designation. So now we're asking students to take more challenging courses, including additional courses in math and in science.
Michelle, if I could jump in,
Sure.
just a quick second. Not to jump in too far. If you just click the next 2 pieces there. I really do want to give a shout out to the teachers, especially at the high school, who have really put themselves out there in the math department with experimenting with double block and the labs for geometry next year with Algebra 2. That 80% goal was derived based on some data where we're looking at our students who are going on to post-secondary studies, and we're seeing that just about 80% of our kids are going on to 2- and 4-year schools. And when those students are going into 2- or 4-year schools, when they're starting in math, they're starting with calculus, or they're starting with statistics, or some upper-level math. So this 80% goal, that 80% of our kids are going to get through Algebra 2, all right, is a good foundational piece, because you need to have those Algebra 2 skills in order to be successful when you get into calculus and get into statistics and those upper level math courses that they're going to be in college. That's where that 80% goal comes from. And I tip my hat to everybody who's been involved in that process, the district for investing in Trish Hustle and the work being done with Erie One BOCES. Again, teachers putting themselves there with the double block, working after school math labs. It's been absolutely fantastic, and I'm looking forward to seeing how we progress with that. You know, the next piece with the science, 100% of our kids taking physical science. Right now, all of our students are taking living environment for that Regents credit, either in 8th or in 9th grade. We want to then expand that so the kids are taking courses in earth science, chemistry, physics, and getting that second Regents exam where they're exposing themselves to a physical science. That's where those two pieces come from.
Okay, great. Thanks, Andy. And so we're encouraging students to get the Regents Diploma with advanced designation. But in addition to that, as we heard earlier also, students can also get a CTE endorsement in addition to their Regents Diploma. So we've talked, and you're familiar with the academies that are offered at the high school. We've got a number of different academies that our students can take part in for that school within a school feel, where they can actually do career exploration while they're still in high school to determine whether this is something that they want to go into. 4 of our programs at the high school have been approved by New York State for CTE endorsement. We've got 2 others that are in the hopper. That information is into New York State, and we're just waiting for final approval on those. So again, moving along even before this was in place. Seal of Biliteracy is another opportunity for our students to gain an endorsement on their Regents Diploma. And what that really means is students are being recognized for being fluent in more than one language. Now, what a job quality to have when they're leaving, especially in today's day and age, to be able to speak more than one language. Also, advanced placement courses. I've spoken to you about advanced placement courses in, I think it was our previous presentation, which was last April, and talked about how we have a 38% increase in the number of courses that we offer in the past 5 years. And additionally, I think it's about a 90% increase in the number of students who are taking AP courses since 2010. What College Career and Civic Readiness is saying is that if you score a 3 or higher, they will award those students with greater student success indicators when leaving high school. In addition to that, we also at the high school offer dual enrollment courses. Now, what does that mean? That means students can take a course that has a cooperative agreement with a local college. So they're taking a course here in high school that they are gaining college credit for. So in essence, a student can leave high school. What a great benefit for them. They can leave high school with courses that are actually taking away the time that they will have to spend taking those courses during their semesters in college. So some students leave high school having a semester under their belt in college. Again, another great opportunity, but something that is being recognized. CDOS, we just heard Ms. Prechtel talk about that and the opportunities that are given to our students. And in addition, it's being recognized, our skills and achievement commencement credential for our special education students. I'm going to turn it over right now, talk about graduation rates, which again is toward the end of toward our finish line.
I guess I would say I only got one slide, so I'm going to try to make it a good one. So they limit me to keep you guys awake. So after having said that, this is a great slide on graduation rates to present, but before I get to that, I just want to say I think maybe Michelle and Dr. Kufel, maybe Dr. Vett, did you guys go to Albany or Washington and write that last requirements for that last slide? And we can't disclose that, because what I'm saying is like talk about being in the right place at the right time for ESSA. I mean, I don't like all of what's in the ESSA regulations, or from what I understand, but talk about being positioned to show what our kids can do besides just graduation, which is pretty doggone good. But look at, we're positioned in all those areas, and we're going to get credit for some things that Michelle pointed out, that if you looked at the former legislation, or quite frankly, if you look at how Business First looks at things, I mean, we're positioned, at least in this area of the college and career ready and civic readiness, to do really, really well. So I'm excited that it's finally coming around to show things we've been working on for a long, long time. So with that being said, graduation rate, if you can, the main changes for ESSA are really in 2 areas. They've added a 6-year kind of the 6th year that a child might be in a cohort that they might need to graduate. And our current figures show that our graduation rates go up. So that's a nice figure that's added now, or a statistics added that shows that kids that might need a little more time, maybe an extra semester or summer school or something to graduate, or just more time to graduate, that's being reflected in higher graduation rates. And then also what's kind of added to that is they take an average of those 3 years and look for certain guidelines for the state. I'm here to say that in all areas, individual graduation rates by cohort, the 3-year trend, the average of those 3 years, Lancaster is well above any kind of interim measures that New York State is requiring for that. We're in great shape. We've exceeded state targets, and when they rank in different areas, 1, 2, 3, or 4, we're earning 4s in all the areas that are they look at graduation for different subgroups and areas right now. So having said all that, we've come a long way since I've been here in the district, and a lot of teachers with graduation rate. We're going to keep at it. We're not going to rest on our laurels because a lot of times it comes down to just working with one kid at one time to come up with a plan to keep them in school, and so that they can be successful and latch onto something, especially at our high school, and be successful in the way that they can be successful. So I'll turn it over to you up, Andy.
All right, thanks, John. And exactly as John and Michelle said, we're making great progress. We're well positioned under ESSA, and I know that we're going to continue to do great things. So an area that's new, English language proficiency. Essentially, want to highlight a few things on this slide. If you look at the past 6 years, 2013-14, we had 4 students classified as English language learners. If you're familiar with the size of our district, at roughly that time, we had about 6,000 students in the district. Right now, as of this current year, we have about 48 students who are classified as English language learners. It's quite the increase in not a long amount of time, not a good distance of time. The cells that are not filled in at this current time are how students are classified. They take a couple different tests throughout the course of their time with us, and the goal is to move them from entering to commanding, okay? So the data that I'm going to show you here is not necessarily to be used diagonally to be able to say how students are progressing this way, because that's not how it goes necessarily. Students can move multiple levels within one test year. But it's interesting to see how the number of students have gone from 4 to 48 and where they are on this chart. Absolutely. It's a great point. The transiency of our L students, you know, we're just meeting here recently. I think we just lost 2 students, but we're going to gain a couple more, 3 more in the next couple of weeks. Just a couple things. Our goal is to move them over, and there are calculations that we can go into the details of how that would occur and how they're supposed to occur. We will not. But it's worth noting that we have 48 students. There are 23 different languages in Lancaster. Okay, just let that sink in for a second. It's not including English. Absolutely.
I'd just like to point out that over the course of the past 10 years or so, Buffalo has seen a huge growth in people who are coming from cultures other than like Puerto Rico. And when I was teaching, probably 75% of my students spoke a second language, but they all spoke Spanish, and several people in the building spoke Spanish. Our ENL teachers do not teach all 23 of these, or do not speak all 23 of these languages. In most cases, these students are coming into these buildings and no one speaks the same language that they do. So that's an added challenge for us as we go about with this.
Oh, thank you, Karen, for adding that. In addition to that, we're looking to... Yeah, please.
Position, you know, a decade ago. And the whole time I was assistant superintendent, we had between 4 and 6 students who were English language proficient. And they spoke one language, Chinese. Decade later, you're talking 23 languages and multiple students and multiple teachers, et cetera, et cetera. This community, whatever, I mean, it gives a historical perspective of just how quickly it changed and is changing.
No, that's a great point, and to think in 6 years since 4 to 48, and you know, the increase is certainly continuing. With that, we're looking to continue to build our internal capacity. How? Well, thanks to the board and thanks to the community, we were able to hire 4 ENL teachers last year, and they're doing a fantastic job. Recently, in an upcoming presentation that I can't even put into words, and really you can't. We had a staff development day on Friday that was unbelievable. The teachers of Lancaster, the administrators of Lancaster just shined, and it's a coming attraction that will be very enjoyable. But our 4 E&L teachers presented, and they had pretty packed audiences each of their sessions because people are interested in looking to build our internal capacity, and that's thanks to the board. I will say our E&L teachers that are doing a fantastic job, they speak one language. They speak English. They do not speak 23 different languages. They're not bilingual. They're helping our students access and acquire the education that they're being provided by their teachers and working with their teachers. With that, I'll turn it back over to Michelle. I'm trying to get my steps up today here.
Okay, so district attendance. Our overall district attendance for the students at all of our buildings is 96%. Great news? Yes. Bad news? It is not one of the measures. But I couldn't talk about chronic absenteeism without letting you know that overall our district attendance rate is 96%. Excuse me one sec. So when looking at the measure of chronic absenteeism, what they are really looking at is the number of students who have 10 or more absences in 1 year. They're going to look at those students and measure them against the overall number of students that are in each one of these buildings. So this data is a year behind. They started the baseline data in 2016-17, and then they measured it against the data from 2017-18. Now our goal is within 5 years that we're actually going to be able to reduce this rate, close the gap or be able to reduce the rate by 20%. So obviously close the gap is what we're interested in doing. However, what our biggest concern is now, we're in good standing as a district. What our biggest concern is though, is that we've seen increases at the K through 6 level. And what we really believe is that those increases are because of those students that actually stay home as an opt-out procedure during the time of the state tests. And so we're going to closely monitor that because those are increases that may not keep us in good standing. So we want to really take a deeper look at that and make sure that we're addressing that as much as we can within each of the buildings so that we don't fall out of good standing.
Okay, so you've heard a little bit about academic progress. So what is a MIP? That's what you're going to hear about now, measures of interim progress. When the state came back and looked at this, they said, okay, we're going to take a baseline from the 16-17 school year, and we want to take that baseline and look at your goals and look at your scores over the next 5 years. We want you to increase 20% every year over the next 5 years, and to see how we're doing with that gap. Basically, we're running a race. We're in a race, so here we are with the race. If you look at our ELA goals, in 16-17, our baseline for ELA across the district was 75%. The state wanted us to get to 80%. We got to 82. Our long-term goal for 5 years is 117. We're doing well. We're getting there in that race. Now let's take a look at the math. Same thing. 16-17 baseline was 89. The state wanted us to get to 93. We got to 102. We're doing fantastic on this race. The trick behind all of this, if you look at that 119, is I have to have those same group of kids take that same test over 2 years. And Karen's going to talk a little bit more about that because we're going to continue to go into that race and we're going to continue to run that race because we do have to cross that finish line.
Okay. So, student academic achievement, things that have not changed. Under New York State's approved ESSA program, we are still going to have state tests in ELA and math in grades 3 through 8. We're still going to have a science test. It currently is in 4th grade. It's moving to 5th and also in 8th grade, and then we'll still have those Regents exams. So nothing has changed there. Under the old NCLB, there was a formula by which we were rated. That formula hasn't changed too much either. What has changed is the numbers we get out of it. We will get a performance index between 0 and 250. A 250 would be if every student in the whole cohort scored a 4 or a 4 on the state assessment. Partial credit is given to the students who are just below proficiency, and we get full credit for the students who are at proficiency, and what we called extra credit for those students who are advanced or mastery. Now this first, in the student academic achievement, we have 2 different indices. And the first one is called the Weighted Academic Achievement Index. And this one includes the students who refuse to take the test. So we're going to take those numbers that I just talked about, where we get extra credit for the kids who get 4s, and we get credit for the kids who get 3s, and we get partial credit for the kids who get 2s. But we're going to divide by either the number of students in the cohort or 95%, whichever is higher. So students who sit out the test are in that denominator. The other measure is the core subject performance index, and that is only students who actually take the test. So that same numerator, but the denominator is only the students that take the test. So let's take a look at William Street's actual 6th grade ELA data. They had 415 students in the cohort, and 47%, or 197 students took the test. 33 scored a 1, and in that formula there's no credit for them. 36 students scored a 2, they get 1 point apiece. 69 students scored a 3, and they get 2 points apiece. And 59 students scored a 4, and they get 2.5 points apiece. So when you add all that up and then divide by 394.25, which is 95% of the cohort, you end up with a performance index of 82. There's a lot of math in this one. So if you take a look now at the core, we're doing that same math on top. Same number of kids taking the test, same scores. This time, though, we're only dividing by the number of students who actually took the test. So our one performance index is an 82. The other one is a 163. Both of those are getting reported to the state. The difference there is just about half, the difference between what we will get in those 2 scores. And obviously, as educators, we want to spend time on moving everybody in this group up and not spending time talking to people about why it's important to take the test. We would rather put our emphasis into the education of students. But both of those will be reported, and both of them will come back to reflect on Lancaster as a whole.
Thanks. Okay, so for those of you who are still awake, the good news is there are 7 total indices, and student growth is the last one. And like Mr. Armstrong, they only trusted me with 1 slide, so this is it. But when talking about student growth and talking about standardized assessments are important because what it does is it gives us data consistent across the state to find out how did the kids in the Lancaster Central School District perform in comparison to Clarence or Honey Eye Falls or Albany, any other school district around the state. It gives us comparative data to find out where are we in regards to everybody else, which is a good thing, because then it helps us reflect on our own practices when it comes to instruction, resources, whatever the case is, so we can maximize the experience for all of the kids, not just our 4A kids, but all of our kids in the Lancaster Central School System. It's very, very important. Now, a number of years ago, you've probably heard of student growth scores as part of the annual professional performance review process for teachers and principals. Annually, what's been going on since 2013 is that teachers and principals in 4 through 8 buildings have been given growth scores. And these have been scores that have been based on a 0 to 20 scale. And those scores have been based on student academic performance on the state level assessments. Under ESSA, what's now going to happen is instead of the teachers getting student growth scores, the individual schools and school districts will now be receiving student growth scores based on these assessments. And instead of those scores being based on a 0 to 20 scale, those scores are now going to be based on a 1 to 4 scale. And how they're going to go forward in computing those scores is using something called a student growth percentile. And what this does is this measures the achievement growth for continuously enrolled students from year to year who participate in the standardized assessments. So let me give you an example. Andy's a fourth grader. He's a happy little guy. And he, as a fourth grader, is going to participate in both the ELA and math statewide assessments as a fourth grader. He takes both of those assessments, and Andy gets a 3. Nice job, Andy. You did great work. All right, room for growth, but that's great work. So in the following year, when he gets into 5th grade, he's going to participate in the assessments again. And when he participates in the assessments again, the following year, he gets a 4. Andy shows growth. Nice job. Now what happens is, as a district, we are now going to receive a growth score for Andy's performance. When he participated as a 4th grader in that first year of participating in that assessment, he is then put into a category with other students like him. He's a male. He's white. He has a similar socioeconomic background, student with disability, whatever the case is. All of those kids are all lumped into a category, and they're compared against each other. And that's the category then when Andy takes the assessment the following year, he's going to be compared to how he performed against that group of students. When he moves forward to the next year, he'll be compared to that level of students the following year, and so on. But let's say in 6th grade, the determination is made that he's not going to participate in any of the assessments. And then when 7th grade rolls around, he says, you know what, I'm going to come back, I'm going to take the math and ELA again. There'll be no growth score that will be given to the district that year for Andy's performance because he did not take the assessment the prior year. So it's very important that on a year-to-year basis that our students continuously, to show that growth and to show that progress, that those students are continuously taking those exams year after year after year so that we get the best data possible in computing these student growth scores. So if you remember back at the beginning, Dr. Kufel had put this slide up there and he said those top 4, College and Career Civic Readiness, the CCR, not to be confused with the Creedence Clearwater Revival, graduation rate. Thanks, Mike. Graduation rates, English language proficiency, chronic absenteeism. Category 1, and then the second category at the bottom, student academic achievement, academic progress, student growth. So the question that we asked at the beginning was, what do those top 4 pieces have in common? And then what do those bottom 3 pieces have in common? Anybody want to take a shot in the dark? If not, we'll just give you the answer. We'll just give you the answer. All right, so if you take a look at those top 4, these are things in which we can control. We can control the programming. We can control the steps in which we are taking to get kids the help they need to increase graduation rates, to get the help, support, and resources for our English language learners, to hook up with outside agencies if we're having issues with absenteeism. Academic achievement, academic progress, student growth. Anybody want to take a ballpark guess at that one? Yeah, we can't really control that. And these are things that could be impacted by student refusals moving forward. All right, that could be a big, big piece in what could impact our overall performance as a district on those bottom 3 pieces. To bring it home, I'm going to give it back to Dr. Kufel.
Thanks, Andy. So really to bring it home, the last acronym that we're going to leave you, I think Michelle touched on it, and I think John touched on it, good standing, GS. It's no longer AYP. So could we have done just one slide and said right now LCSD equals GS? Maybe we could have, but you would have missed a little bit of the excitement understanding of ESSA. ESSA is much more comprehensive than No Child Left Behind. There are a lot of very good things that we are excited about in terms of its comprehensiveness that No Child Left Behind didn't have, and we're well positioned, as you'd hopefully heard throughout the course of the evening. And we are excited about that. For all the indicators and all the different subgroups and all the different potential levels where we're in good standing. We're looking forward to making more progress and looking to use what is already moving forward, I guess the train on the tracks, good timing, and just keep on going with this. Any questions?
I just wanted to pile on for 1 second.
Please do.
And that is, it was back in 2015, 16, we had open sessions and public forums about the opt-out movement and that whole thing, and I wasn't always the most popular guy here, and maybe I'm still not, but I'm just going to be honest with you like I was honest at then. And that was that, hey, listen, this is a federal legislation. Before it was No Child Left Behind, and now it's ESSA. And we predicted that it wasn't going to change, that people have to take tests and they have to do that. And we also said, well, it's the parents' right and they can do that, and that's perfectly fine, and we understand their position. Let's not forget the fact that there are repercussions for this school district and every school district in the land. And so when you look at this, it's LCSD equals GS, but for how long? So when you look at the numbers, the difference, the true number is that we're 162. Our kids are doing great, and they're absolutely fantastic, everything else. But it's not divided by that number. It's divided by the number of kids that actually took it, and now we're an 82. No one's going to be going out there and saying, oh, well, they're really a 162. No, they're going to say they're an 82. And then I also, back in 2015-16, I told you the story of 2007, and I'm going to tell you it again. In 2007, this school district was designated as a Contract for Excellence school district. It was one of 14 school districts who were put on a list because they didn't have enough students take the test. Still the same number. You have to have 95% of the students. You had to in 2007, and you have to now in 2019. And when you don't, they put you on a list. And in 2007, they put you on a list called the Contract for Excellence. And we were sitting there, and I remember I went to Albany to complain to senators. Senator Gallivan wasn't there at the time. It was Senator Volker. And I went to about 14 different senators and explained to them over and over again and saying, listen, we have 99% graduation rate. Our students are doing great. We have more kids taking AP, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The reason we're on this list is that we didn't get 95% of our students to take the test. And they didn't care. Those guys did. They took us off the list. We eventually got off. It took me about 7, 8 trips. Eventually they got it, and they took those 14 school districts off. But while that happened, it was about a year, they took $2.7 million of our money and told us how to spend it and everything like that. So what I'm telling you, and I told you in 2015, and I'm going to tell you again today, LCSD equals GS, but for how long? And there's another important component here. The real value is for us as educators in this school district. If you take the test, we can design programs, whether it's academic intervention services or special ed programs or so many other things, helps and supports to get you where you need to go. But without that data or information, we are hampered by the lack of that information. So again, I'm going to keep on saying it. We're going to see how this plays out. Nothing's changed, unfortunately. The federal government hasn't changed the necessity and the mandate to take the tests. They haven't changed how it's going, and that while it's in a different letter system and a different, letters and everything else, it's very similar. So it's really important to know this, and we can continue to debate it and discuss it and everything else. But long as people, I appreciate this presentation, so people know the truth. People know what's really going on and how this actually plays out. So when LCSD, or if LCSD is not GS, then at least people understand why that is. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you for understanding, and I appreciate this presentation.
So, yep, just a last comment. Yeah, let's clap it up. I just wanted to say that if you notice how the superintendent, he gets all fired up when he talks about that, right? And being board president, I meet with him regularly, and I've heard that speech like 100 times, and he's fired up, and he believes in it, and it's because that, we don't want anything that is going to be a poor reflection upon Lancaster, given the fact that we put students first, and the winds of change from the state and federal level change quite a bit. They blow quite a bit. What does not change is the course that Lancaster is on to develop good curricula, have good teachers, have good programs, and change and evolve to meet the needs of students and not to meet the needs of the state and the federal government. So hats off to Lancaster. Again, thank you for the clarification and articulation of the data. So we'll move on to 5.